Clint Eastwood's final message to America. You need to hear this. At first, there is only silence. The kind of silence that demands attention, not empty, not meaningless, but charged with something heavy, something final. A slow pan reveals the room, a study filled with the echoes of a lifetime. Shelves lined with books that have seen more years than most men. Framed movie posters, each one a chapter in American cinema. A single, well-worn cowboy hat resting on the edge of a mahogany desk, untouched for years. And then Clint Eastwood, a legend. A man who had walked through history and lived to tell the tale. He sits in a leather armchair, aged but unbroken. His steel blue eyes, sharp as ever, lock onto the camera. He doesn't speak right away. He doesn't need to. The weight of his presence alone is enough to make time stand still. Finally, he exhales. A long, measured breath. You ever wonder what a man thinks about when he knows his time's running out? His voice, gravelly, deep, carrying the wisdom of 9 decades, cuts through the silence like a knife. He leans forward, his hands resting on the armrest, fingers tracing the cracks in the old leather. I've never been much of a talker, he continues. Spent my whole life playing men who let their actions speak for them. But today I need to say something. Because if I don't, no one will. The interviewer, a young journalist in a pressed navy suit, shifts uncomfortably in his chair. He's been in plenty of interviews before. But this is different. Mr. Eastwood, it's an honor. He begins, his voice steady but respectful. You've lived through wars, Hollywood's golden age, the rise and fall of generations. But you've stayed silent for years. Why now? Why break that silence today? A smirk tugs at the corner of Clint's lips. It's not amusement, it's knowing. Because I've had enough, he says, his voice slow, deliberate. I've had enough of watching people forget what made this country great. The room tightens. The interviewer leans in. What do you mean? Clint exhales, rubbing his fingers together as if feeling the weight of every year that's passed. His eyes darken not with anger, but with something deeper. Disappointment. America used to stand for something, he says. Hard work, honor, grit. Now we're more divided than ever. People don't talk, they shout. They don't listen, they wait for their turn to be offended. The interviewer hesitates, choosing his next words carefully. So, what changed? Clint leans back, crossing his arms over his chest. The lines on his face deepen, not just with age, but with the weight of a lifetime spent watching the world shift beneath his feet. People used to take pride in who they were, in what they did. They carried themselves with dignity. Whether you were making movies or fixing cars, you gave it your best. You didn't look for shortcuts. He sighs, his hands tightening slightly over the armrest. But now people want something for nothing. Nobody wants to work for what they have. Everyone's looking for someone to blame. And let me tell you something. His voice lowers. The kind of tone that makes people lean closer, afraid to miss what comes next. That ain't how you build a country. Silence. Thick. Unshakable. The interviewer swallows, gathering himself. So, Mr. Eastwood, if we've lost our way, how do we find it again? Clint takes a long pause, his eyes fixed on something far beyond the camera, as if he's looking at the country itself, seeing it for what it was, what it has become, and what it still could be. That's exactly what I'm about to tell you. The air in the room feels heavier now. The warm glow of the lamp flickers slightly, casting deep shadows across Clint Eastwood's face. His expression is unreadable, but his eyes are sharp, filled with something that feels rare these days. Conviction. He runs a hand over the armrest, his fingers tracing the cracks in the old leather. "You want to know the real problem?" he says, his voice steady, deliberate. "It's not politics. It's not the economy. It's not even the media." A pause. The interviewer leans in. "Then what is it?" Clint exhales slowly, his jaw tightening slightly. "We stopped taking responsibility for ourselves. The weight of the words lingers. Used to be, when life got hard, people dug deep. They worked harder. They didn't sit around complaining, waiting for someone to fix things for them. They took action." He shakes his head. Now everybody's looking for an excuse. People don't want to work. They want to be famous. They want to be comfortable. They want to be told they're special without ever earning it." The interviewer sits back, absorbing the words. "And you think that's why America is struggling?" Clint nods. "That's right. A country is only as strong as the people in it. And if the people are weak, if they quit when things get tough, if they waste time arguing instead of doing, then what do you think happens to the country?" Silence. It falls apart. The interviewer swallows, his voice a little softer now. "So what do we do? How do we fix it?" Clint lets out a dry chuckle. "That's the thing. The answer's simple. People just don't want to hear it." He leans forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "We fix it by being better, by doing the things we don't want to do, by working harder than we think we can, by shutting up and putting in the effort." A pause. Then his voice drops lower. "By remembering that nothing worth having comes easy." The interviewer watches him carefully. "You make it sound like we're running out of time." Clint's eyes flicker. He shifts slightly in his chair, as if carrying the weight of something unseen. "That's because we are." Another silence. "But this one is different." He's not just talking about America anymore. "I ain't got much time left." "I know that." The interviewer starts to speak, but Clint raises a hand, stopping him. "And you know what? I don't care about that. What I care about is whether this country still has a chance." His fingers drum against the armrest. His expression hardens. "We got two choices." He raises a single finger. "We can keep making excuses, keep pointing fingers, keep letting this country rot while we sit back and watch." Then he raises another. "Or we can wake up and do something about it." The interviewer exhales, running a hand through his hair. "And if we don't?" Clint leans back, his eyes narrowing slightly. His voice, when it comes, is quiet. "Then we don't deserve to be saved." The words hit like a hammer. The interviewer doesn't respond. He can't. Clint lets the silence settle. Then he looks directly into the camera. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Clint Eastwood sits in the same chair, but something has changed. His shoulders seem a little heavier, the room a little quieter, as if the weight of his own words is settling in. He runs a hand over his jaw, thinking. Then, finally, he speaks. "America's got one last chance." His voice is lower now, slower, but no less powerful. "One last chance to remember what made it great in the first place." The interviewer leans in. He doesn't want to break the silence, but he has to ask. "And what was that?" Clint exhales. His fingers tap against the armrest, steady, like the ticking of a clock. "Hard work. Integrity. Respect." He looks up, straight into the camera, as if speaking to every person watching. "You want to save this country? Stop waiting for someone else to do it. Stop blaming the government. Stop blaming the other guy. Get up. Get your hands dirty. Raise your kids right. Be the kind of person your grandparents would be proud of." The room is silent. Even the interviewer has nothing left to say. Clint leans back, his eyes scanning the room as if he's searching for something, maybe a memory, maybe a moment in time when things made more sense. People ask me all the time, "What's the secret? What's the meaning of life?" He smirks, shaking his head slightly. "I'll tell you what it is." A pause. Then his voice drops to almost a whisper. "It's waking up every morning and doing the right thing, even when no one's watching, even when it's hard, even when it don't pay off right away." He sits up straighter, adjusting the hat on his knee. "I ain't got much time left." "But you do." His eyes darken, his voice turning sharp again. "So what are you going to do with it?" The interviewer finally speaks, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want people to remember?" Clint takes one final look at the camera. "I want them to remember that this country was built by people who never gave up. And if we want to keep it, we better start acting like them." Silence. A long, unshakable silence. Then, without another word, he stands up. He places his cowboy hat back on his head, adjusts it slightly, then turns and walks toward the door. The camera stays on his empty chair for a moment, just long enough to feel the weight of what's just been said. The screen fades to black. Do you agree with Clint Eastwood? Do you believe America still has a chance? Comment below and let us know your thoughts. If you found this message powerful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story that needs to be heard.